All right. Hey there, Danielle Matthews here. I am coming to you live from Florida. If you're new to my content, I help people that are on a healing journey to heal physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And every single Monday, we have book club. Few months, we are reading The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, Mickey Singer. Incredible. I read this book about 6 years ago. And coming back to it has just been so insightful, so deep. I like the amount of notes in this book that I've written in the sides is just incredible. And if you're not part of our book club, totally fine to just tune in. These conversations are unique. Each and every chapter is kind of a different concept to be looking at, and super beneficial. So today's chapter 13, if you are reading along in the book, that's where we are. And this one is called Far, Far Beyond. And it's really talking about, can you tap into your infinite potential? I think a lot of us are maybe told that, hey, like you have infinite potential within you, right? And you're probably like, hey, I don't feel like that at all. I don't feel the infinite potential. I have no idea how to tap into it. Like, what are you even talking about? This chapter really gets into kind of the how-to and very clearly shows us where our boundaries are actually keeping us trapped. Hey, Tina. Hey, Rhonda. Let me know when you guys get here. And if you're live on book club, it's always good to have conversations with you as we go. But this concept of boundaries is interesting. I find that maybe my view on them is different to most. Hey, Lou. And I think it sounds like Mickey is in alignment with my thoughts on it, where boundaries are really keeping you limited, keeping you away from that expansive self. But we'll get into it. Might be slightly controversial for some of us to feel into this, but anyway, let's jump in. So, question for you: if you had a laser beam, I don't have one, otherwise I would shine one. If you had a laser beam, and let's say you're outside and you start shining it, how far can a laser beam go? Does anyone know? Hey, Charlotte. It's interesting to think about this because a laser beam will actually travel for forever. It will go on for infinity. What will stop it is when it hits up against a barrier. So when a laser beam hits a barrier that it can't penetrate, it stops. And so that infinite beam becomes finite. Hey, Joy, good to see you. Thanks for jumping on. So thinking about your infinite potential, all right? So this laser beam, Charlotte says it goes a long, long way. Yeah, it does go a long, long way. And the same is true with yourself. Like you have this infinite potential that is flowing to and through you all of the time. It's what animates your body. It's how you're here right now, watching me. All right, that infinite potential is flowing through you. And when it comes up against a barrier, it stops and becomes finite. And so this whole chapter is about, well, what the hell are those barriers that we're bumping up against that are actually limiting us, that are actually making it so we don't tap our full potential, so that we are not the most expansive being that we can be. And limitations and boundaries only exist in the places where you stop going beyond. This is why he calls the chapter Far, Far Beyond, because he says the moment you stop going a little bit more, pushing a little bit further, is the moment you actually become finite. You become small. You become inside of a box. He says boundaries create the appearance of finiteness in infinite space. To go beyond, you must keep going past the lines that you put onto things. And here's the cool thing, guys. These are lines that you create in your mind, and these are lines that you can also erase in your own mind. So this is not like, oh, someone's putting me in a box, somebody else is limiting me. This is all you. This is fully you. No one can determine what's being thought in your head or what you do or don't do. All right? You actually have that autonomy. So he says, this is seen most clearly in your constant attempt to make the unknown known. So he talks about how our mind is constantly trying to make sense of the world that we live in. And in doing that, it's trying to put everything into a category, into a box, so we feel like safe. We start to kind of control the things and the people and the dynamics around us. And we put this here and this there, and we think this ought to be this way, and I'm going to try and find out about that so that we feel secure and safe. But we're staying safe inside of a box, inside of a cage. And he says, your views, your opinions, your preferences, your concepts, your goals, and your beliefs are all ways of bringing the infinite universe down into the finite where you can feel a sense of control. Yikes. Hey, Catherine. He says, the analytical mind cannot handle infinite. So your analytical mind that we are so blessed with as humans, right? We have this. Animals don't have it. We have it. And it has allowed us to navigate this world and create incredible things. But it's also the thing that is limiting us. Oops. And I'm going to read it again. He says, your views, opinions, preferences, concepts, goals, beliefs are all of the things that our mind, like our personality, right? What makes you, you? What makes Catherine, Catherine, and what makes Charlotte, Charlotte? You know, each of us are different. And he says those actually become limitations when you're looking to tap into the infinite potential. And he goes on to say, this mental model has become your reality. You must now struggle day and night to make the world fit your model and label everything that doesn't fit as wrong, bad, or unfair. This is why we get so freaking frustrated in our day-to-day lives with people. Like, put a 1 in the chat if you got annoyed with somebody in the last 48 hours. Did something happen that you got frustrated? Be honest. Be honest. I know this chat should have lots of 1s in it because we as people, right, we have preferences. Well, it should have been this way. Why is it that way? Da, 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 da. Maybe you were driving somewhere. Maybe you bumped into somebody at the grocery store. Maybe somebody said something to you. Maybe you didn't like a text message that was sent, right? Like, we get frustrated and it is normal. Okay? So children, Joy, enough said, Joy. Yes. So absolutely, right? These things happen and we get frustrated. So here's what he says. He says, this is why we are getting frustrated. If anything happens that challenges how we view things, we fight it. We defend it. We rationalize. We get frustrated and angry over simple little things. This is the result of being unable to fit what's actually happening into the model of our reality. We think things ought to be a certain way. They're not that way. And so now we're having trouble with reality. Whereas if you just didn't have that, what he calls boundary, that preference, that opinion, you actually would not be bumping into frustration. If you could just have an open heart, accept, right, what's there. My mastery students know all about that. I'm looking at Tina. We've been talking about that a lot. All right, so how do you undo this? He says, first, you got to understand why you built up these preferences in the first place, right? Because we all have them. We all have them. And no one, in fact, like, we think we're supposed to, right? Oh, this is my personality. This is how I am. This is how so-and-so is, right? So first of all, understand why you built this. And the easiest way to understand this is to study what happens when your model doesn't work. And I loved what he said here. Like, so many of us have been through life-shattering moments. Maybe it was the death of a parent, the death of a loved one, your child getting sick, losing a job. When the most foundational piece of our identity, and to put this into context, I will talk about my life. So growing up, I was always really good in school, like top of my class. I graduated, I think, top 5 in high school. I was like whatever in college as well, distinguished major, blah, blah, blah. And so I was always high performing, okay? And so part of my identity was wrapped in it, those achievements. I also was really good at sports. So I was always doing sports. Anything I picked up and tried, I was really good at. I served my community. So like right after college, I went and did Teach for America. I was serving in an underprivileged area in Colorado. And so all of this, right, was my life. It was Danielle, right? She's really nice. She's helpful. She's smart, athletic, blah, 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 blah. And then I was hit by a drunk driver. Age of 23, all of that entire world that I had known, gone. So now, all of a sudden, and think about your thing. Like, yours is probably not a drunk driver. If it is, I get you. But yours, whatever happened, death of a family member, child gets sick, you've lost your job, you've lost your home, whatever. It rattles your foundation. And for the first year, I can just share with you my experience. For the first year, all I did was try and claw myself back there. Trying to get back to the life that I had, right? The ability to live independently and be able to be with friends and do the sports and all the things. Because my foundation was rocked. And all of a sudden, when I was told you can't do those things and you never will be able to do some of those things again, it was like, well, who am I if I'm not all of those things? I had been so identified with who I was showing up in the external world that when all of those things were gone, I didn't know who I was anymore. And how many of you have been rocked in this way? And you can put in the chat, if you're open to it, what it was that rocked you. I mean, all of us have had an experience like this where you start to question things. Like, life hits you so hard. I know a dear friend of mine in my business, she's just lost both of her parents in a very short time frame. And so her foundation, I know, is rocking right now because this construct of who I am in relation to others and things, etc., it shakes. When those things fall apart, you start to shake. And I think it's important to understand that initially you will beg, borrow, steal, right? You will fight to try and get back to that normal because your mind knows that and it's comfortable with that. All right. And eventually you will realize, like, well, I can't. Like myself, I couldn't. And it's so interesting. The first line in the Yoga Sutras is, now the practice of yoga begins. And I find this so interesting because Mickey says the same thing on top page 121, if you're with me in the book. He says, once you've had an experience like that, and most people have, right? Lou's saying a car wreck, husband had a head injury, disabled 30 years ago. There you go. Shook your foundation. Yeah, changes everything. Makes you question, why am I here? What's going on? Once you've had an experience like that, and most people have, you realize that the model you've built is tenuous at best, and the entire thing can fall apart. Mine fell apart, completely fell apart. The whole model and all that it's built upon, including your entire view of yourself and everything else, can start to crumble. And this is why in the first line of the Yoga Sutra, where it says, and now the practice of yoga begins, is because now that life has hit you so far, you have tried everything you know at the level of the mind, willing yourself forward, doing, and yet the car wreck happens. Your loved one is disabled, you're disabled, you've lost the job, you've lost the income, whatever. The relationship that was the love of your life is broken up with you, they've cheated on you, whatever. Right? Now that you've realized the external world doesn't have it, and I can't control it, and I can't keep it together, now the practice of yoga begins, which is the practice of going within into the inner journey. And you ask deeper questions. Well, who am I and why am I here? And what is this infinite potential people are talking about? And how do I tap into it? All right. Our whole world doesn't have to fall apart in order for us to figure this out, though. I had a student in my inner management mastery. He said, Danielle, I've never been through something intense. Like, I feel like I can't reach this because I've never had a tragedy. And I just started smiling. I said, well, you're the blessed one that you're asking these questions without tragedy having to strike. Most people are so in the zone, in their mind, just boom, going through life, that a massive thing has to happen to wake them up, to shake them. Otherwise, they would keep going on the same pattern, the same everything, and blah, 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 blah. Right? Something had to happen for that pattern to break. And sometimes it doesn't feel good, right? I was talking with a woman and she was telling me that her husband betrayed her. And I said, well, isn't it interesting if you could look at it this way, that now is actually an opportunity to break the pattern, because you told me that you were just serving everybody else and you never, ever looked after yourself. It was always family. First it was siblings, then it was your kids, and now, boom, like this happened, your whole reality, your family structure, the core of it has shaken. But isn't this a beautiful opportunity to now put yourself first and think about what do you need and what do you want, right? But if it hadn't happened, you never would have broken out of the spell. So it's interesting. Tina says a house fire, car accident, illness. Yeah. Like, I truly believe that our soul, our higher self, has orchestrated things to come into our life at certain times to break the patterns, to break us open, to cause us, right? Like an egg has so much potential, but it has to be cracked to see it. Whether it gets cracked by the chick on the inside coming out, like it has to break down for the chick to come, or if we're going to use the egg for cooking, right? We have to crack the egg to get what's inside. It has to break. Sometimes you've got to break. Things have got to break you so that you break open to what's really in there and you start asking different questions and you start showing up differently to life. I am sure after a house fire, you started to ask different questions. You start to prioritize things. You start to realize, wow, all the shit in my house that I care so much about, that I'm wanting to protect and everything else, really doesn't mean anything. What's important is my own health and my life and my loved ones. And the other stuff is just creating stress. It's really interesting. So he says start looking at the reasons you do all of this stuff. So if you're a smoker, why do you smoke? If you're trying to quit, it's a good time to figure out what the urges are that make you want to smoke. And so, like, if you overeat, well, what is that urge? What are you trying to fill? What void is inside of you? Rhonda says having a work-related injury at the beginning of this year was the greatest blessing. It was. It totally was. I was front row seat to that playing out for you, Rhonda. All right, he says you're constantly trying to stay within your comfort zone and you struggle to keep people, places, and things in a manner that supports your model. The moment somebody starts behaving in a way that is outside of your expectation, your mind starts talking and you start to make a lot of internal stress. I had one of the best mentors I ever had when I started my business said to me, Danielle, if you can get comfortable being uncomfortable, you will have massive success in this business. Go into your discomfort. Push yourself until that thing becomes comfortable. Now go into the next thing that's uncomfortable. Stay with it until it becomes comfortable. Now go to the next thing. And what's so fascinating is that the spiritual journey is the same. And he talks about it here. He says, the zone of comfort is finite. All attempts to stay within it keep you finite. Going beyond always means letting go of the effort to keep things within your defined limits. You have two options. Number one, you can live life inside of your comfort zone and devote your life into managing and controlling everything outside of you so that it stays comfortable in and around you. Right? And probably most of you are on that path. That's what you've been doing. But option number two is you can work on your freedom. And freedom means releasing the comfort zone. It means releasing the blocks. It means getting all of this out of here, which is where boundaries come in. So think about animals at the zoo. I just went to the zoo with my nieces, and it's like this interesting inner reflection that comes at a zoo. And I'm not giving my opinion here on it at all. I'm just saying it's so interesting. If you think about a tiger in a cage at a zoo, right? Clearly, it's in a finite space and it's barred in, right? It knows its barrier. And the trade-off here is that tiger is no longer free to roam, but it gets all of its needs met. It gets medicine if it gets sick, it gets food every single day. They know the time of day, right? Everything's taken care of. And it's so interesting because people, what might look like prison to you will look like safety to somebody else. And so people will typically build boundaries around themselves, all right, so that they feel safe. They want to be locked in. They want the government to make decisions for them. They want the security of this, that, and the other thing. And what happens on your spiritual journey is you will start to realize, oh my God, the stuff that I thought was keeping me safe and comfortable is actually keeping me held in, and you want to break through. All right. It's like people that feel more secure in a job versus being an entrepreneur. Like the sure thing for people is easier. Like, well, it's safe, but it's also very limiting. You have to show up to work every day. You only get so many days off. Like someone else is controlling your schedule. Like it's safe, but for an entrepreneur, that looks like hell. Like, I don't want somebody telling me when I can show up and where I have to be and if I can travel or not travel or whatever, right? It's totally different. And so don't compare yourself to anybody else on this journey, right? This is just where is your soul at right now, and realizing that sometimes what's around you is actually limiting you. And he talks about how when you truly awake spiritually, you realize you are caged. You constantly start hitting up the limits of your comfort zone. You see that you're afraid to tell people what you really think. I was laughing about this. Catherine and I were laughing about this the other day, just with some family related stuff. And we're like, man, I wish I could be this way, but I'm so nervous to say this or like to actually take this action because it's going to maybe hurt somebody else, even though it's better for me. Like, it's so interesting how we limit ourselves, right? We've put ourselves in a cage. Fascinating. And we're constantly hitting up against this. So what do I say? Like, think about, number one, are you afraid to say something, to speak your mind to somebody? Are you too self-conscious to express yourself freely? Do you not show up online on social media because you're afraid of what somebody might think of you? All right? Like, it's amazing the limitations within our own mind. And he says, if you really start to ask, there's really no good reason. You have just set limitations upon yourself, and you don't need to. And he talks about, and I loved this analogy, he talks about a dog that needs to be fenced in so it doesn't run off. And back in the day, right, we had like a physical fence, and now we have electric fences. So the way an electric fence works, I think we all know this, but you put a collar on a dog, as it gets close to the electrical fence, it buzzes him, right? And so then the dog is like, what just happened, right? There's no physical barrier. Everything looks fine. But when I go there, it hurts. And so now the goal of the electric fence, right, is that the dog is now too scared. It figures out where it gets buzzed, and now it gives it a little bit of space because it's like, I don't know what's over there, but it hurts, right? So it avoids what hurts. It avoids the discomfort. That is what we're doing with the dog here. And what he says is that sometimes for us people, a cage doesn't look like a cage. The dog doesn't look like he's caged in, but when he gets close, it gets a little uncomfortable, and so he moves away. Well, guys, what happens with your mental limitations? Understand this. Your mental limitations are also the edges of your cage, and when you start to approach them, when you feel the insecurity, when you feel jealousy, when you feel fear, when you start to get self-conscious, these are the cage walls. This is where the dog is getting buzzed, right? This is where you're getting the internal buzz. And what he's saying is that this is where spirituality begins. This is where you lean into it. So what if you had a dog? My aunt's dog was like this. It was like, that thing can't hurt me. I'm going to just go past it. And so this dog figured out that if it ran through the barrier, it would buzz a lot for a little while and then it would stop. And this is the same thing that the concept we're teaching here. Like some dogs will come up next to that buzzing and they just go and the buzzing goes and it doesn't get more intense or anything else. And they're like, well, I can handle this. What if I get a little closer? They get a little closer and the buzzing's a little bit more intense, but they're actually okay. But it's intense, but it's okay. They get a little closer. Now it's really loud, really loud. They go a little closer. Now it's not as intense because they went through it. And I move a little bit away. It's less intense. Now I move this far away. Now I'm on the outside. I don't feel it. And so it just got used to, it got comfortable being uncomfortable, right? So the dog got used to this discomfort and then was free. If you have a dog that is willing to sit through the discomfort of that fence, it will be free. You will not be able to hold it in. And the truth of the matter is, if you as a human being can get comfortable being uncomfortable, the sky is the limit. There is no limitation. That's how you reach your inner potential. Is when as soon as you bump up against a barrier, you go, dang it, there's one of those invisible walls, and you push past it, and you do it anyway, and you see the fear, and you face it, and you move, right? These are invisible barriers, but you have to be willing to be slightly uncomfortable so that you can push past it, and then when you push past it, you grow, okay? I think this analogy of the dog and the electric fence is the best one. Eventually you will realize that, it can actually hurt you. And you go beyond it, and you start to go beyond a psychological limit. Guys, these limitations are 100% in your own mind. 100%. These limitations are you. And so you start to see where things got programmed in, where maybe it was actually like your parents' fear that now you've taken on as your own fear. And it's like, it's wild. It is wild what happens. So what I want to say to kind of close out this chapter, and if anyone has questions or comments or thoughts on this chapter, I thought pretty clear teaching you, look, infinite potential is within you always. The limitations are in your mind. How do you get past them? Lean into the discomfort. So you end up starting to love your edge. You will love it. The moment that you start to feel discomfort is the moment you know you're in the direction of your own freedom. Because when you start to feel discomfort and you learn to relax with it and lean into it, you will break into the next piece. This is what, if any of you study Bob Proctor, he talks about the terror barrier, where most people, when they step out to do something new, their mind freaks out and tells them, don't do that, red alert, right? And tells them to fall back. And so most people hit that terror barrier, that fear, and they bounce back. What we're saying is that fear, that terror barrier is just like the electric fence for the dog. It's a buzzing. It doesn't feel good, but if you go through it, you'll see that there was nothing there, just like the dog. Well, it buzzed for a little bit, but now I'm fine, right? You go through and it's bigger. Charlotte says this was a challenging chapter. Yeah. Yeah, because this challenges you, because people limit themselves. And it's so interesting. I have my own thoughts about boundaries, where people say like, oh, no, you need to learn how to have your boundaries, right? It's good self-care to have boundaries. And in my mind, I'm like, it's very limiting. Very, very limiting. Because the moment you put up a boundary, it's like first wall on your cage. No, here's my line. Great. Well, now you'll be comfortable, but you're not going to grow. So you're choosing, do you want to be the animal at the zoo that gets fed, medicine and everything feels comfortable and great? Or do you want to be the animal out on the plains, living its full potential, roaming, experiencing freedom? I don't know. It's your choice, right? It's your life. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying for me, I started to realize that, wow, I am limiting myself. Like, I used to hate social media. I hated putting my face out on social media. Hated it. 5 years ago. And then I just saw, wow, I'm limiting myself. I'm not meeting people. I'm not reaching people. How can my message connect with anybody if I don't put myself out there? And so I started to show up. And, people are nasty. I had somebody tell me, you should wear makeup, right? You would look a lot better if you wore makeup. Well, Danielle doesn't wear makeup, so it would look really false if I showed up here with a bunch of makeup on, right? But these are these boundaries, And it's like, you start, I had my own fears, my own thoughts. Oh, people judge me. What if? Who am I to talk? Whatever. And then I just showed up and started talking, and all of that got quiet, right? And it's like, oh, no, people do want to connect, and people do want to have similar conversations. And so whatever the boundary is for you guys, lean into it this week. All right. I challenged several of you that were on here a couple weeks ago to start doing cold showers because it's a simple task, right? And it's not going to hurt you. And it's actually beneficial for your system, right? It will release dopamine. Like, so much happens when you get into the cold. But this was a simple way to see where your mental barrier is, right? You're in there in the hot water, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, I'm going to turn on the cold. And it screams. Your mind will scream. This is the fence. This is the wall. And you just go, I'm doing it anyway, right? And you turn it on, and then you're in there, and you're like, wah! And it's cold, right? And then you start to you can relax into it. I actually really enjoy my cold showers now because I feel like alive after, like a vibrant, like alive, like my body's awake after. But my head still doesn't want to go into it because it's a little uncomfortable. So that's just a simple way to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And saying what you need to say, despite what someone's going to feel, or if it's going to hurt somebody else, that's not your problem. If you can speak your truth and move authentically in life, this is where your infinite potential can start to unfold more and more and more and more and more. All right. So, final piece of this chapter I'm going to read. What would you like to go beyond? Would you like to feel no edges? Imagine a comfort zone that is so expanded that it can easily fit the entire day no matter what happens. The day unfolds and the mind doesn't say anything. Can you imagine going through your day and not having your mind jump in at all? It sounds amazing. It's possible. You simply interact with the day with a peaceful, fully inspired heart. If your edges happen to get hit, the mind doesn't complain. It all just passes through. This is how great beings live. When you are trained, like a great athlete, to immediately relax through your edges, when they get hit, then it's all over. You realize that you will always be fine. Nothing can ever bother you except your edges, and now you know what to do with them. And as I said before, you will end up loving your edges to the point where you start to realize they are pointing your way to freedom, and all you have to do is constantly relax and lean into them. And then one day, when you least expect it, you fall through into the infinite. And that's what it means to go beyond. So that's what the essence of all of this was. Teaching you to just push and push and push a little more each and every day, and you will grow and grow and grow and grow. And you will start to see where you, my friend, are limiting yourself. So I don't know, Charlotte, if you've got any questions on this chapter. You said it was a challenging chapter. If anyone has any other comments, I'm happy to kind of bounce back and forth with you. Hopefully this conversation was enlightening, helpful to kind of digest and process, because it's big. And it feels heavy maybe because it's like it doesn't allow you to be a victim anymore. You're not a victim of circumstance. You're not. You are empowered. You are empowered to go within and to keep expanding yourself and to keep bumping up against the things, and pushing beyond them. That's where your growth is. And only you can do it. I can't do it for you. No one can do it for you. I was sitting in meditation with my spiritual teacher this weekend. Actually, it was on Friday. We had a class that graduated here at the ashram. And so we had their little ceremony. And Guru Dev said to them, he said, listen, I can't do this for you. Your parents can't do this for you. Your kids can't do it. Your spouse can't do this for you. God can't do it for you. You have to do it for you. You've got to learn to master your own mind. You've got to do it. No one else can do it for you. So starting in the most basic way, right? The cold shower was where I suggested it, is a great thing to do. So I don't see anything coming through on the chat, so I will love you and leave you here, guys. We are going to read chapter 14 next, letting go of false solidity. Looks like a good chapter. All of them are. This will be the end of part 4, and I'll catch you next week, same time, same place. I will actually be out in Sedona, Arizona, so it'll be early for me, but you'll get to see some of the beauty out there. So lots of love to you guys, and I will talk to you later.